Dust whipped across Red Hollow's main street, stinging eyes and settling like grit in every crack of the wooden planks. Hooves clattered, iron spurs rattled, and the townsfolk pressed against shuttered windows, holding their breath. A lone rider broke through the haze, the leather satchel swinging at her side, boots sliding into the stirrups with a practiced ease. Evelyn Hart dismounted with a soft thud, her fingers lingering on the worn leather of her holster. Every step toward the saloon was measured, deliberate, her eyes scanning the street. A boy peeked from behind a water trough, his face pale, the echo of fear in his wide eyes. She didn't flinch. She moved past the hitching posts, past the rattling sign that swung on a single rusty chain, until the saloon doors groaned under her touch. Inside, the smell of smoke, whiskey, and dust met her first. Laughter from Silas Grain's gang rolled like thunder across the room. Cards slapped against the table, coins clinked, and a chair scraped sharply when someone shifted. Evelyn slid into a shadow near the bar, her coat brushing against the worn wood. Every eye in the room flicked toward her, curiosity tempered with unease. "Evening, Miss Hart," the bartender muttered, his hands trembling slightly as he polished a glass that would never shine. "Evening," she said, voice low, smooth, carrying weight without raising a sound. Her gaze never left Silas, lounging across the table with a cigar smoldering between his fingers. He didn't yet know the storm that had just walked in. The air thickened. A young girl burst through the swinging doors, sobbing, shoes kicking up dust. "They're going to burn the ranch," she cried, clutching a small pendant that caught the lantern light like a signal. She pressed herself against Evelyn's leg, trembling, staring at the outlaws who hadn't even noticed her yet. Evelyn's hand brushed the edge of her holster. Fingers lingered over the revolver hidden beneath her coat, every joint ready, every movement precise. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The tension in the room swelled, a living thing, waiting, coiling, ready to strike. A gust of wind rattled the saloon doors, scattering ashes from the hearth onto the floor. One of Grain's men tensed, hand twitching toward his gun. Evelyn stepped slightly forward, the leather of her boots whispering against the boards. Silence felt like a weight, pressing against everyone's chests. The town held its collective breath, the dust outside frozen mid-air, waiting to see what the widow would do next. And in that silence, with her calm but deadly presence, it became clear Red Hollow would never be the same after tonight. The girl's sobs rattled against the walls of the saloon, sharp and urgent. Evelyn crouched slightly, lowering herself to meet the child's eyes. "Quiet," she whispered, voice steady, almost a command. The girl pressed closer, her tiny fingers clutching the pendant that glimmered in the lantern light. Grain laughed from across the table, a low, cruel sound. Well, he drawled, cigar smoke curling toward the ceiling. "Looks like the widow wandered into my little party." His hand hovered near his gun, a subtle twitch that spoke of practiced menace. Evelyn didn't flinch. She let the girl settle against her, fingers brushing the revolver beneath her coat. Every muscle tensed like a spring, ready to snap. The clink of a coin on the table echoed too loud in the thick, expectant air. The other outlaws shifted, the scrape of boots on floorboards sounding like distant thunder. "She's just a girl," one of them muttered, voice unsure. His eyes darted between Evelyn and the pendant, as if sensing the story hidden in its glint. "She's not just a girl," Evelyn said softly, almost to herself, but loud enough that every man at the table stiffened. Her eyes locked on Silas Grain. "And I'm not the widow you think you know." The room seemed to shrink. Candle flames flickered, casting long shadows that danced like specters over the walls. Evelyn's hand brushed again over her holster, fingertips lingering on the worn metal. The girl pressed a little tighter, as though she could feel the storm gathering in the widow's calm. Outside, the wind howled against the boards, rattling the doors. A loose shutter banged against its frame, echoing through the room like a warning bell. Evelyn stepped closer to the table, slow, deliberate, her boots whispering against the floor. Grain's smirk faltered for the first time. "You think you can just..." But Evelyn's gaze never wavered. She leaned down slightly to the girl, whispering a single word that carried more power than any shot. Steady. The bartender, behind the bar, froze mid-motion. His hands, once shaking, now rested lightly on the edge of the counter. He had seen enough in his time to recognize the calm before the storm. Coins clattered as one of the outlaws pushed them aside, fidgeting with his gun. The tension coiled tighter, a spring ready to snap. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the pendant again, the faint symbol catching her attention, and a shadow of memory passed across her expression. She didn't move hastily. Every motion was a calculation, precise, controlled. The air hung thick, heavy with fear and anticipation. Outside, the wind carried the faint, distant howl of a coyote, sharp and lonely. Inside, the silence pressed on like a drumbeat, echoing against the walls, around the table, and into every heart. Every man in the saloon knew, even if they didn't admit it, that something was coming. Something they hadn't seen before. Evelyn Hart, widow of tragedy, stood at the center, calm, poised, a storm held in human form. And Red Hollow waited, breath held, for the first strike. Silas Grain slammed his fist on the table, making glasses jump and coins clatter. Enough games, he barked, voice sharp, eyes narrowing at Evelyn. Step out of the shadows, widow, or I'll drag you into the dirt myself. Evelyn shifted forward, every movement controlled, deliberate. The revolver under her coat pressed lightly against her hip. Fingers flexed over the grip, calm, precise. Her eyes never left Grain, measuring, calculating. A bead of sweat slid down his temple, unnoticed by no one. A gun cocked somewhere behind him, a man too eager, too brash, and Evelyn's hand twitched in perfect response. Not a sound, not a word. Silence fell again, heavier than before, broken only by the soft whine of wind rattling the saloon doors. The young girl clutched at her coat, eyes wide. Evelyn leaned down, voice low, steady. Watch. Don't move. Trust me. The girl's fingers dug into the pendant, the faint shimmer catching the dim lantern light like a heartbeat. Grain smirked, trying to regain control. You think some widow can face me? I've taken men twice her size and left them bleeding in the dirt. He waved at his gang, an unspoken command. Boots shuffled. The scrape of leather on wood echoed through the tense room. Evelyn stepped fully into the open, the revolver now visible, gleaming faintly. Her movements were fluid, confident, every step a silent warning. I'm no widow, she said, voice calm as steel. And I'm not what you expect. A murmur ran through the gang. Fingers hovered near triggers. A coin spun on the table, landing with a sharp clink that sounded like a gunshot in the thick air. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the bartender, who barely nodded, his hands poised to move, cover exits if needed. Grain rose, chair scraping harshly against the floor. So it's true, he said, voice low, dangerous. They whispered about you, survivor of the Red Mesa raid. Fast with a gun, clever enough to stay alive. Evelyn's hand slid along the revolver's grip. She didn't respond. The silence spoke for her, louder than any threat. Every outlaw knew, deep down, that the storm in front of them was not born yesterday, nor last week, but forged over years of survival and pain. Coins rattled again, a chair tipped, footsteps shifted. The air itself seemed to pulse, thick with fear and anticipation. Outside, the wind howled through the canyon like a warning. The girl's eyes never left Evelyn, trusting her completely, sensing the power coiled in the widow's calm. And then Evelyn moved. One step, two steps deliberate. Fingers tight on the revolver, eyes locked on Grain. The room held its breath. Every man frozen, every heartbeat loud enough to echo in their ears. The standoff had begun. Not a single shot yet, but the tension was electric, ready to snap into chaos at the slightest provocation. Red Hollow waited. Every shadow, every sound, every shift of light carried the weight of what was about to happen. Evelyn Hart, widow of tragedy, stood poised, quiet, unstoppable. And in the hush before the storm, everyone knew. Tonight, no one would leave unchanged. Don't take it off. Just do it, Evelyn whispered, voice low, steady, almost teasing. Silas Grain froze, cigar smoke curling toward the ceiling, misunderstanding her meaning. His hand twitched, then fumbled with the belt of stolen loot piled on the table. Evelyn's fingers tightened on her revolver. Every heartbeat echoed in her ears. She moved a fraction closer, eyes locked on him, calm as the wind over the canyon. The girl pressed against her side, silent, trembling but trusting, feeling the surge of something bigger than fear. Grain snorted, arrogant. You think I'll... The click of metal broke him off. Evelyn's gun cleared the chamber with a smooth motion, faster than any man could react. One precise shot cracked the air. The bullet slammed into the edge of the table, tipping coins and scattering papers like startled birds. Chaos erupted. Grain lunged, gun raised, but Evelyn sidestepped, pivoting with the grace of someone who had danced with death before. Another shot rang out, catching him off guard, disarming him. His gang scrambled, hands shaking, eyes wide. None moved fast enough. Evelyn's calm masked the storm inside her. Years of loss, survival, and cunning compressed into a single sequence of motions that no brute force could match. She moved through the room like a shadow with purpose, every step deliberate, every threat neutralized before it could even form. Outside, the wind slammed against the saloon doors, rattling boards and lanterns, carrying the faint howl of a distant coyote. Inside, the air was thick with dust, smoke, and fear. Evelyn pivoted again, revolver steady, eyes on the last standing outlaw, a man trembling by the doorway. She didn't speak. A flick of her wrist, a soft command in the silence, and he dropped his gun. Coins and cards lay scattered, the room littered with the evidence of panic. Grain slumped against the table, dazed, defeated, staring at the woman who had dismantled his reign in moments. Evelyn knelt, whispering to the girl, bravery isn't being the loudest. It's doing what's right, even when they doubt you. The child clung to her, eyes wide, understanding without words. The bartender exhaled, fingers loosening on the counter, watching as the widow straightened. Red Hollow had stopped holding its breath, the tension finally easing into a hum of relief. The town would remember this night. Every creak, every whistle of the wind, every scattering of dust carried the story now. Evelyn holstered her revolver. She didn't need accolades. The town had seen, and that was enough. Silas Grain and his gang would speak of her for years, if they lived. The girl followed quietly, knowing that legends weren't born in stories, but in the actions of those who dared to stand.